Okay, in the second video, what I want to go over is a Shomen cut, or a straight overhead cut with the jo. As in the first video, we went over a thrust. And I think the second one you need to learn is a overhead Shomen strike. So now what I'm going to do is go over the Shomen, or the overhead straight cut with a jo, which is real similar to a sword. So a lot of the principles are the same. So the first thing you want to do is you want to make sure that you are over this web of this hand is in line with that weapon. So you don't want your thumb off to one side. You want your hypothenar on the back side of this, and you want your web on the front side. So your radius will line right up with your weapon. Okay, so it's the same way with whether you're using a sword or a jo. It's the same idea. And then the backhand kind of floats on the back of the weapon. And I like this because then I can use this for thrusting or guiding the weapon. So those are the two main principles of this. Now for a sword, I'm going to be in here closer, but a jo, I'm going to be a little bit farther out because I have a lot more leverage that I need to control the end of the weapon. So I'm typically farther out with a jo. So for an overhead strike, the idea eventually is you want to get to where your hips move this weapon, but in the beginning you're not going to be able to do that. You're just going to lift it with your shoulders and then bring it back down. But I'm going to show you how to kind of start using your hips to move the weapon. So if I'm going to lift this weapon, it's very important that this left arm I push out from my center, okay? And then, so when I push my center forward, what I mean by that is when I push my center, see how I don't have to bend my arm or do anything? When I push my center forward, it pushes my arm forward. And then I'm gonna take my right arm, which is on the top side of this weapon, and as I push my left hip forward, that naturally pulls my right foot or right hip back, and then that pulls the weapon towards me without doing anything with my arms. I'm not lifting with my shoulders, with this, any of that, because that'll wear you out and it'll hurt your shoulders eventually. So I'm just learning how to like draw a drawbridge, raising a drawbridge, okay? And then eventually, once I get to here, see, when the weight's way out there, it's heavy to lift. But in this position, see, in this position, it's real light to push up above my head, okay? So that's why when you're here, you're going to lift with my hips. When my hips get to a certain point, this is real light. So then I'm just going to push right above my head, okay? And the tendency is to push above your head and pull out. You don't want to do that. You want to just push over your head. Now, if you can't see, that's a bad thing. So you want to lift and push your elbows forward, okay, instead of pulling everything back. So again, from the side, I'm going to raise the weapon. Once it gets to about here, I'm going to step back into this position. Once I have lifted, so I'm going to lift overhead, now I'm in this position right here. So now I am trying to strike straight down in a straight line. So I'm not coming from the side or anything. I'm coming straight from this position. So what I'm going to do is, the tendency is to start pulling your elbows down as you go forward. What you're going to do is you're going to push your elbows forward and squeeze your wrists. And that's going to push the weapon out in front of you. So this is just going to go out, your hips, see how my hips get my weapon to move, and then extend. Now the key to stopping the weapon is this, because getting it started is easy. What most people do is they start the weapon and then they try to pull back to stop the weapon, and that's a wrong way to do it. I mean, everybody does that when they start, but what you want to do is, as I start the weapon, it's extending from my hip at this left arm that stops the weapon. So if this arm is extended, that tip can't go any farther than there because it's going to hit that stopping point. So instead of pulling and then you get that dip in the tip of the sword because you're pulling the sword, you want to extend to stop the weapon. So here I'm up in this position, I'm going to extend, it gets going, and then this is what stops the weapon. This left hip is what stops the weapon. So from up here in this position, I'm going to extend forward, and then I'm going to extend my left hand to stop the weapon. Instead of pulling back to stop the weapon, I'm going to push. And because my hips are attached, wherever my hips stop, that's where the tip of my weapon is going to stop. And in this case, it's going to be a jo. So let's review. The most common mistakes are you use your shoulders to lift the weapon and you use your shoulders to throw it forward. You want to use your hips to lift the weapon, just nice and relaxed, lift the weapon, and then when you extend my left arm out. And then that's what stops the weapon where I want to stop it out, wherever you want to stop it out towards your target, that is stopped by the extension of this hand. And so you're up, and then you swing straight, like in a straight line, and extend from your hips, and that's what stops it. So another key point, and this is absolutely the most key point here, is if I don't push any power from my center forward and I pull to get my weapon to go, you don't have anything to stop it with. So what I do is when I'm moving forward, I extend my center forward to stop that weapon, because if you pull back, so if I pull back to lift and then I pull back to cut, I'm pulling my center back. And you'll never have any power to move your weapon. So from here, I'm gonna push my center forward, because I have to equal the pressure coming up from the ground to the tip has to equal the energy that I'm cutting with to make it stop at a perfect point. So what I mean by that is if I'm back here in this position, when I come forward, I'm gonna have to extend from my center upwards. I know it sounds kind of weird, but you're extending from your center upward to match. So I have to perfectly match the power coming up from here has to match the power going out, and they have to sort of meet at the target. Okay, so from here I'm going to come forward and push equal from up and top to get it to stop perfectly. So that's the key, is the same amount of power I put through my weapon from the top, I'm gonna put the same amount of power from the bottom to stop that weapon.